Good morning. Welcome to Rising. The show of shows is here, and I'm so glad that Batya Ungar-Sargon is joining me for it. Batya, what is on deck?
I am so glad to be here with you, Robby. Today we have associate editor at Reason Magazine, Liz Wolfe, who will be discussing the tragic stabbing of author Salman Rushdie, and Daniel Davis and Trita Parsi are going to join us to look back at the U.S. withdrawal out of Afghanistan 1 year later.
But first, of course, we want to discuss the latest with the Mar-a-Lago raid. The New York Times reports that at least one Trump lawyer signed a statement on June 3rd that all documents marked as classified and held in Mar-a-Lago had been given back, actually. The DOJ has since filed to subpoena surveillance footage from the estate, which includes viewing from outside a storage room that showed after one instance in which officials were in contact with Trump's team that boxes were moved in and out of that room.
And according to NBC, the search warrant signed by Judge Bruce Reinhart shows the raid was part of an investigation into potential obstruction of justice and violations of the Espionage Act. Fox News obtained the Trump raid search warrant and discussed what the FBI took from Mar-a-Lago. Let's watch.
We know there are 3 pages of items that were taken from Mar-a-Lago. I want to read some of them to you. We're told that the FBI took 20 boxes of items from the premises, including one set of documents marked as various classified, top secretive, and sensitive information documents. The property receipt, which is also part of this, indicates that FBI agents collected 4 sets of top secret documents, 3 sets of secret documents, and 3 sets of confidential documents. The list also includes the FBI taking a leather-bound box of documents, binders of photos, and handwritten notes. And as far as the actual property receipt, we're told the clemency letter that was written on behalf of Roger Stone, President Trump's longtime confidant, was taken by the FBI. Also some information about the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, and we're told there were other photos, miscellaneous box of secret documents. So basically you get the whole point here, and I'm going through this as we're looking, that there were some documents taken. However, I suspect, and I don't know this for a fact, that the Trump team will likely say he declassified all of this before he left office.
To that point, Trump's office has responded saying Saturday that the former president had declassified the documents that were present at Mar-a-Lago. The FBI and DOJ have since seen an uptick in threats to federal law enforcement in the wake of the raid on the Trump household, according to NBC. So that is, I guess, kind of the big question. If the argument that Trump's going to make is that, well, look, I'm the ultimate authority on what is deemed classified and what's declassified. I have declassified all these documents, so then it's not improper for me to have taken them or removed them from the White House or wherever they were. Is that a persuasive argument, do you think, Batya?
Well, we know that he didn't take the sort of official steps to declassifying these documents, right? There's no record of that. So I could see how some people would say that this is once again Trump flouting norms and then, his political opposition wildly overreacting to that, right? Like how important is that, official process of declassification? Well, it depends how knee deep in the sort of expertise class you are, right? Experts tend to like things done according to a certain way, whereas other people outside of that class would be sort of like how that in and of itself could never justify this huge breach of norms of what happened at Mar-a-Lago during the raid.
Right. Although it sounds like then to go the other way, it sounds like he was given plenty of opportunity, right, to give back the documents or to go through whatever the proper procedures were, and that was just not done. And so we've come to this bridge where, look, they can always get you for something, right? If they try hard enough, I guess there's crimes, and then there are procedural crimes, and if they try hard enough, right, obstruction of justice is very common. Efforts to, thwart the law enforcement agencies from going after you or for putting you behind bars. You're trying to stop them, and that's obstruction of justice, which can be very, very silly. On the other hand, this almost seems very easily avoided if they had just done the bare minimum. And also, Trump, was very he signed laws making these kinds of things stricter in order to punish, the kind of the Hillary Clinton email type thing. So it is also very Trumpian to be kind of become ensnared in like wanting greater law enforcement of this kind of thing, and now, of course, have that be used against him, which is something I wish more Republicans who are in this moment, this one little moment right now of realizing that, hey, law enforcement can be weaponized against our side, against anyone deemed a political threat to the regime or to the deep state. This can be the tools we have voted to give them can be used against us. How interesting! And I wish they would then act on that. then defang some of these institutions. Then get rid of these tools because they are used. They'll never just be used against your enemies. They'll be used by the regime, by the bureaucracy of law enforcement, which is not a strictly political organization, but something that can fight Republicans and Democrats depending on who they think is a threat to the institution. So it would behoove Republicans to be a little bit more consistent. And then, of course, I'm not sure Democrats have any consistency here. They're just saying whatever the FBI needs to do, they should do it because they don't perceive any threat from them right now.
Yeah, I do think it's important to point out that Trump has claimed, and there seems to me to be evidence that this is true, that from his point of view, his team was completely cooperating with the DOJ. The DOJ had a subpoena in June, I believe. They stopped by Mar-a-Lago to pick up some boxes, and Trump made an appearance at that meeting. So from his point of view, this was a sort of friendly process that he was cooperating with, and then they sort of radically escalated. To me, and I'm going to talk about this in my radar, what's so interesting about the warrant and the receipt is that like so much when it comes to Trump, it had just enough information in it to confirm the biases of both sides, right? But not to actually give an honest person enough information to understand whether or not, this justified the raid. So it sort of, in a way, entrenched people into their corners and also into their hypocrisies, as you're pointing out. Last week, I don't think either side really covered themselves in glory. Let's put it that way.
And everyone should understand this, everyone, including Trump, everyone, there's no such thing as a friendly meeting, a friendly sit down with law enforcement. There's no such thing. They're always looking for information. They're always waiting for you to say something wrong. Michael Flynn said the same thing. That's exact same thing, that I thought it was a friendly discussion about certain things that he'd had. And then what happens? He gets charged with whatever it was, perjury or obstruction of justice. Same deal. You can have attorneys present, make whatever information they want or they want you to give them, have an attorney sign off on it, give them that information. Don't just we'll have a friendly conversation. It's never friendly. Never friendly. So meanwhile, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is coming to Trump's defense over the weekend. Let's listen to that.
And you look at the raid at Mar-a-Lago, and I'm trying to remember, maybe someone here can remind me about when they did a search warrant at Hillary's house in Chappaqua, when she had a rogue server and she was laundering classified information. I don't remember them doing that. I do remember them manufacturing a false conspiracy theory about Russia collusion. I remember that. That was not true. That was an abuse of power. I remember a lawyer for the FBI got caught doctoring an application for FISA surveillance against an innocent man. I remember the FBI at Merrick Garland's direction being sicked on parents going to school board meetings.
Yeah, as typical, I remember a lot of those things too, and I'm sure you do as well. And those were bad. Those were, I think many of them were bad. I do think, with the schools, that memo about, be wary about, parents at school meetings was in fact really bad and was not a good response to legitimate concerns and complaints from parents who wanted to make their frustration with schools over curriculum, closures, everything else known. And, of course, the Russiagate we've talked about on the show a million times. That said, all of those things don't mean that all those things could have been bad without that having any bearing on the situation we're currently in. But do you think, I'm curious for your take on, and maybe you're going to get more into this on your radar, I don't want to give away the game, but the parallels between Hillary's emails and this, do you think that they're fair?
Well, to me, the real parallel is the one that Darvio Morrow drew last week here on Rising, between what the FBI did to Dr. King and has done to Black Americans pursuing civil rights, for so long. That feeling of like, well, we recognize this, we know what it's like to feel politically persecuted by the FBI. I think that's really interesting, and I was kind of hoping that, in DeSantis's speech, he was going to end up there. I remember when they, smeared Dr. King, the sacred emblem of civil rights, and tried to make him commit suicide, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, that's the real parallel here. Of course, there are differences, but I really hope that, like you were saying, that this brings Republicans a new understanding of what Black Americans face when it comes to law enforcement, and what you were pointing out exactly, like that there are some Americans who never get a fair shake the way that others do. Another point I would point out, the Wall Street Journal made a really good point in their weekend editorial. They argued that, when you do bring law enforcement to bear on a former president and a potentially future president, that is an inherently political act. So when Merrick Garland says, no one is above the law, of course that is true. But at the same time, you are engaging in politics. You cannot separate that out when you're talking about somebody who got 72 million votes. That man represents something extremely important in the American public sphere. And, that really is, I think, a very important piece of it that can't be removed.
No doubt. Well, we'll continue having this discussion with your radar and then mine as well, coming up next.